We are officially recording now. Good afternoon, one and all. My name is Shannon Knapp, and I am the Executive Director and founder of Heart of Horse Sense. I'm also the President and lead mayor of Horse Sense of the Carolinas. Um, so today we're going to be talking about an introduction to equine-assisted psychotherapy and learning. And this is a format that we're going to use again and again, because it's often easier for us to come together here than it is to come together in person. We have done these lectures in person at our brick house on the farm, but such as it is, it's best that we do it this way. And hopefully we'll get to gather again together soon. We had a wonderful group of people, by the way, for our volunteering last Saturday. We had 16 people. And so Jake and I did an experiential for everyone. That was lovely. What I'm going to encourage you to do, though, as we go through the material, I'm going to encourage you to put questions in the chat box. So if it feels like put it there kind of as safekeeping. I kind of call it a parking lot. So you can park your questions there. And then when I stop and take a breath and take a sip of water, I can check the questions. And if we're going to get to that, I'll say that. And then if it needs addressing right away, then we'll do that. With any luck, we'll be able to have a good 15 to 20 minutes at the end for just straight up Q&A, but I'm not opposed to questions in the middle of. I don't know if you guys are all familiar, but one of the things that you can do down at the bottom, if you hit reactions, you can thumbs up, you can clap, you can send me a heart, or you can raise your hand. There's other things that you can do too, but you can raise your hand there. So if you have a question that you feel is really important and you want to break in, raise your hand. And all that will do is alert me that I've got a hand raised. And if I can, I'll go to your question or I'll wait for the next natural pause in the course material. So if you guys are buckled in and ready, I am somewhat known as a fire hose of information. So here comes the fire hose, and strap in. So I'm going to screen share, and I'm going to share a presentation that I often give in the community about equine-assisted psychotherapy and learning, right? And so we're going to talk about what is EAPL, and we're going to talk about the certifications and trainings. What we're going to do today is we're going to define these terms, and you're going to have an overview of those main certifying and training organizations, and you'll walk away hopefully with a very simple understanding of what EAP, EAL is, how it is offered, and who it is for. So a quick visual. This is an old graphic that we made back in 2013 to try and help folks understand kind of the breadth of all things that one can do in a therapeutic way with horses. So it has some language that's somewhat outdated, but I leave it here just as instructive, kind of gives you a sense of the universe. So if the tree itself, the trunk of the tree, is therapeutic horsemanship, then there are various offshoots of how people are interacting with horses, right? First and foremost is something called hippotherapy on the right here and therapeutic riding on the left. Now, hippotherapy does not involve hippos. Hippotherapy is specifically riding to create physiological change, riding for physiological benefit, right? And it often involves, it's not considered true hippotherapy unless there's an occupational therapist or a speech and language therapist or a physical therapist in the arena with the client and a horse professional. So this is a clinical billable intervention if you have an occupational therapist, a speech language therapist, and a physical therapist, or a physical therapist. You don't need to have all of them. You just need to have one of them. And they, of course, are professionals in their own field, and they are taking advantage of the movement of the horse to help with a physiological issue for a person on the horse's back. So an example I like to give of this is that if I had scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, and my curve went one way, let's say, went just like one direction, hippotherapy might encourage that client to be laid over the back of a horse against that curve or with that curve. It's all the profession. It's not my job. I don't know that stuff. But I might lay that client down across the back of a horse in order to loosen, in order to change some physiology for that person. So it is a physiological intervention, usually for hippotherapy. So that is kind of in a nutshell hippotherapy. Therapeutic riding is what 9/10 of the rest of the world thinks I'm talking about. And probably you guys, as you've been volunteering here and showing up here, when you say horses and therapy, almost immediately folks' minds go to traditional understandings of therapeutic riding. So I like to say same church, but wrong pew. You're on the wrong side, or you're close, but not quite. Therapeutic riding does not involve an occupational therapist, a speech language therapist, or a physical therapist by rule. A therapeutic riding session can be solely and exclusively offered by a therapeutic riding instructor, right? So that's someone, and we'll talk about that training and certification here in a minute, but they're a therapeutic riding instructor, and they usually come with a super, super strong horse background, obviously. So in therapeutic riding, you can be doing it specifically for recreation. There are plenty of stories of kiddos that this is the thing that they get to do that's just for them. If they're special needs or otherwise challenged, et cetera, et cetera. It's recreational, and it's how I started in the field. I started volunteering at a therapeutic riding place when Richard and I lived in Texas, and I became interested in not the physiological side of things, which seemed to predominate even when we were doing therapeutic riding. I was much more interested in the mental and emotional benefits of hanging out with horses. So that's how I ended up here. So there's recreation, there's therapeutic vaulting, which it's a whole thing unto itself. Google horse vaulting and enjoy. There's Special Olympics that's specific with therapeutic riding. There's education, and there's competition, right? There's all sorts of things that can happen within the therapeutic riding universe, or on that particular branch. The short answer is that neither therapeutic riding nor hippotherapy is what we're doing here at Horse Sense or Heart of Horse Sense. Although those things, some of those physiological benefits may happen, they are not part of the treatment plan that we're working on when we're working with clients. So now we start to kind of get into the field of what we do here. Now I'm going to go to this branch of the tree next, horsemanship. So horsemanship, for those of you who've been to the farm, you've done lessons with my husband, Richard. He's teaching horsemanship, right? And horsemanship is kind of this blanket term that refers to how we engage and connect with horses, right? So in horsemanship, you can use horsemanship for therapeutic benefit, which again, many of us who play with horses know that playing with horses teaches us important things about ourselves and about our world and about how we interact with that world without it meeting the level and criteria of therapy or counseling, right? So horsemanship, there are programs out there all around the country and the world that use horsemanship and mentorship. So there are programs that have mentors who are, further down the horsemanship path than some of the clients that come in, and they mentor them through the process of learning natural horsemanship or the 7 games or whatever kind of horsemanship you might be subscribing to. There's also equine assisted skill building, and that is, we are specifically working on things like accountability, punctuality, some of those kinds of things, communication, And we're building very specific skills, but we're not doing therapy. And there may or may not be a therapist present. In fact, usually there is not a therapist present, a licensed clinical therapist present. Stewardship is what I was referring to a minute ago. A lot of folks and many residential treatment facilities take advantage of stewardship to inculcate values and inculcate good skills. So Elida Home, down the road from us here in Asheville, Elida Home is a residential facility for at-risk kids of a variety of issues, clinical issues. And part of what those kiddos do at certain points is they clean the stalls, they feed the horses, they do the chop wood, carry water of caring for horses. And we all know that can be incredibly instructive and beneficial, right? So stewardship is a way to integrate horses into positive benefit for human without it necessarily meeting the level of therapy or counseling. And then of course there's riding programs, right? There are riding programs teaching, how to ride, things like that, that if you've ever had a traditional riding lesson and ended up in tears because of something touching you emotionally, you've experienced horsemanship riding lessons, right? Or riding programs. That happened to me and happens to me fairly regularly, that I bump up against something inside of me that I wasn't expecting through the course of attempting to go on a trail ride with the horses or learn how to take on a new kind of horsemanship or jump or things like that. So as we do those things, we naturally bump up against things that may cause us to grow, but it's not therapy. So that's kind of the horsemanship branch of this tree. We'll go to the equine assisted learning branch next. And equine assisted learning is where we really start, at least here at Horse Sense. And when I say Horse Sense, I kind of mean both of them, both Heart of Horse Sense, the nonprofit, and Horse Sense of the Carolinas, the for-profit, air quotes, for-profit. Anyhow, so we always, you have a mental health professional and a horse professional as part of our sessions, even if they're equine assisted learning. Many of the populations that we serve are compromised or challenged in some way, or need special attention and awareness of special attention to certain issues, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means as we go along through the course or through today's lecture. But equine assisted learning programs can, at other farms, I could be an equine assisted coach. I don't have a therapy degree. I'm not doing therapy with anyone, but I'm a coach and I've been to coach college, Coach U, and I do coaching with people through their own personal challenges and towards their own personal goals. You don't have to have a mental health professional for that, although I know some mental health professionals who also do equine assisted coaching. The distinctions can get really blurry. And it's really important that if someone is doing equine assisted learning and being a coach, that they understand quite clearly the dividing line between therapy and coaching. And that's something that those who've been to coaching school have been trained in, hopefully quite thoroughly. So there's also school programs, which we've done in the past historically, where, again, we always have a mental health professional when we're working with clients because we feel it's the ethical thing to do. And it is the best, it's the highest level of care, that the level of care that we wish to offer. So we've worked with kiddos at, for example, Edneyville Elementary School a number of years ago. We trailered horses.
Save myself $35.
Hold on, we've got someone who needs to mute. If you would, okay, good. It seems like we've hit it. So we worked with Edneyville Elementary School. We trailered the horses there. They brought us the behavioral and emotionally challenged classroom, and we worked with the kids in that classroom. And we worked on some of the same things that one might work on in equine assisted skill building, but we did it through a therapeutic lens and with a therapist present. So we were working on respect. We were working on communication. We were working on taking turns, some of those kind of things. Equine assisted learning can also include things like equine assisted yoga, right? We've done those here at Horse Sense and love them. Wellness programming in general, including mindfulness. One of my favorite things is mindfulness-based stress reduction, and I'm an MBSR trained person, teacher, and I love to lead equine-assisted mindfulness retreats. And we generally do those. This is the one thing that, for example, Jake and I do together. Jake is also a horse professional and not a therapist, neither am I. But Jake and I will teach equine-assisted mindfulness courses together because of my training in mindfulness-based stress reduction and my training not stepping into the world of therapy. So long story short, and we finally get to the meat of the matter, equine-assisted psychotherapy, right? So equine-assisted psychotherapy, there are three real big expressions of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the presentation. But the short version is that it is not equine-assisted psychotherapy unless there is a licensed mental health professional directing treatment with the client at every session. So, and we'll get into a little bit more about that. So we're going to talk about EGALA, we're going to talk about PATH, we're going to talk about natural lifemanship. I could have put it this way: as of last count, there could be over 50 or more different branches off of this equine-assisted psychotherapy tree. There's that many different kind of trainings and certifications. In fact, there are more than 150 trainings and certifications in this young field to date and counting. So this is a bit of just the landscape, though, that we're going to be playing with. You're going to get used to an overload of acronyms, right? And you don't need to know these, but this is more just demonstrative of the fact that there's a lot of stinking acronyms in this field. And you're going to hear the language thrown around a lot. And if you ever don't know, be sure and ask when you're here at the farm. And I would say be sure and ask when we're at a volunteer event, rather than once you are starting to help us with clients. That's not the best time to ask us those kinds of questions when our attention is focused on the client. But if you ever hear us use those phrases, the acronyms that you don't know, ask, because there's just a ton of them. So we'll get to the ones that are most important for us. But this is just, like I said, demonstrative of how many stinking acronyms there are in our field. The big three acronyms that are going to matter a lot or the most that you might hear again and again is PATH International. PATH stands for the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. We'll talk a little bit more about their history in a minute. EGALA stands for the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association. And NL stands for natural lifemanship. Okay, so we're going to dive deep into each one of these. So PATH International is what used to be known as NARA/EFMA. Now, NARA when it was NARA, it stood for the North American Riding for the Handicapped Association. So in the intervening 10 years, the past 10 years, it's grown well beyond North America. It's no longer just riding, and we no longer use the term handicapped. So they realized that they needed to change their name. And so they went about changing their name. And after all sorts of, focus groups and strategic planning and all that sort of stuff, they came up with PATH International, which is the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. Right? The designation EFMA stands for Equine Facilitated Mental Health Association. So EFMA is the mental health branch of what used to be NARA. Now, it's since been subsumed into the overarching umbrella of PATH International, although there are splinter sounds negative. It's not splinter, there's subgroups under PATH that focus exclusively on the mental health piece and on the learning piece. But You may hear the term NARA and EFMA thrown around, and all that is it harkens back to folks that have been in this for a long time and know those terms because they're, I think, about a decade old now. I'm not entirely sure. But PATH International is the place that originated things like hippotherapy, that originated and trained people to offer therapeutic riding. That is the core foundation of what PATH International does and has done historically, primarily therapeutic riding, hippotherapy, vaulting, those sorts of things. And they've only relatively recently, and only a subgroup, is focused on the mental and emotional benefits of interacting with horses. So they do have trainings that are available to folks, specifically in equine assisted mental health and learning. They have there, you can learn all about it, and as you're interested, you can dive deeper. You can learn more at their website, pathintl.org. They are a nonprofit, and they have an annual conference, or at least pre-COVID they did, and now it's gone online. So, and we at Horse Sense do not currently have anyone who is PATH trained. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. And if you've got time to kill, I'll happily share it with you, but none of it is necessary for today's conversation. So EGALA is the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association. They started in 1998. They were originally, they started at a treatment center, a residential treatment center for at-risk boys, and a mental health professional at that treatment center, and a guy who kind of ran the horse portion, which was like roping and that sort of stuff, doing more horsemanship type things. They started to realize the overwhelming benefit that some of the boys were having out of hanging out with the horses. And they got together and they thought, well, maybe we should go clinically after this. This should be an intervention. So, and we'll talk more about what that means. But for example, PATH does not require that there be more than one person involved in an equine facilitated or equine assisted mental health intervention. The horse professional and the mental health professional can be the same person in the PATH International world. That is not true of the EGALA world. The EGALA world is very specifically a team approach. There's always a mental health professional, there's always a horse professional, and one or more horses. So the human team is 2, and the horses can be 1 to 100, right, or 1,000. But short version, EGALA is brought in the treatment team approach. Through the years, the EGALA model has changed. At current, and for the past at least 15 years, I would say, it has been 100% unmounted. There's been no riding involved in the EGALA work. So if you walk into an arena and you see a client on the back of a horse, you know they're not practicing the EGALA model, because EGALA is 100% unmounted. So almost everyone at the farm that you have met, Richard, myself, Talia, Chris, Jake, many of us have been trained and may even be certified in the EGALA model. I'm EGALA advanced. I've been in it for a long time. But we work towards everyone being EGALA trained, but not necessarily EGALA certified. So it's the second of what I call the big 3. The third training that's out there and certification program is natural lifemanship. And it is, you will hear the language trauma-focused equine-assisted psychotherapy. That's what TF-EAP stands for. And believe me, we try and say trauma-focused equine-assisted psychotherapy once, and then we say TF-EAP the rest of the time because it gets a little tiresome to say it over and over again. But natural lifemanship is very specifically, again, a treatment team approach. There's always a licensed mental health professional. There's always a horse professional. When we're doing mental health, natural lifemanship also has trainings that are available if you want to be a natural lifemanship trained coach. So you can go that route. The core of who natural lifemanship is, though, is a mental health intervention. And it is, in my opinion, the premier mental health intervention out there for all the trainings and certifications out there. It understands and really incorporates mental health and specifically trauma-informed mental health into the work that we're doing. So I'm a natural lifemanship certified horse professional. I'm also a natural lifemanship trainer. And as we go through this training protocol for our volunteers, you'll be spending time with me in the arena and we'll be doing this work together. So you'll get to have hands-on time learning the foundations of equine assisted psychotherapy that's trauma informed through the natural lifemanship lens when we get back together in groups again. And throughout your volunteering. So that is a stopping point. I'll take a breath there and I'll stop my share and just see if I don't see any hands up. I don't see anybody needing. So I'm going to take a sip of water and then I'm going to go back into our next segment. All right. So what is equine assisted psychotherapy? You're going to hear the term equine assisted and equine facilitated. It doesn't matter to anyone. It doesn't matter to the horse. It matters to people, but it doesn't matter to the horses. There's some philosophical differences about assisted versus facilitated. I've often always come down on the line of, it doesn't matter to the horse. I'm not sure why it's going to matter to me. And Jim has just asked if we will make handouts. And absolutely, we can make these handouts, these slides available to you and follow up. So we'll ask Jackie, our wonderful new volunteer coordinator, I'll get her the PowerPoint or the keynote, as it were, of this presentation, and she can get it to you guys so that you have it available to you. Great question, Jim. Thank you. All right, so facilitated, assisted, the horse doesn't care. You'll hear guided, equine guided education, equine guided. Again, the horse doesn't care. Equine assisted psychotherapy at its core is experiential, right? One of the ways that we speak about the work that we do when we're talking to folks in the community, when we're talking to other mental health professionals is, if folks are tired of talking, right? If talking alone got the job done and relieved whatever it was that is imposing itself on me and my mental health, then experiential therapy wouldn't be necessary. But there are many, and especially those who have a trauma history, for whom talking about it is not going to get the job done. So experiential at its core, equine assisted psychotherapy is experiential. It is in vivo. It is happening in real time. Whatever it is that's happening is happening right here and now, not me sitting in a chair telling a therapist about a disturbing conversation I had with a loved one 2 weeks ago, right? That is self-report, that's after the fact, that's some distance from the event itself. What happens in vivo is that we're able to watch what happens in real time while it's happening, rather than depending on self-report after the fact, right? It is akin to adventure therapy or wilderness therapy. You may have heard those terms thrown about. There's lots of great work done in adventure and wilderness therapy, and they are experiential as well. Outward Bound, for example, does a lot of adventure and wilderness therapy. So high ropes courses, week-long expeditions, kayaking, sea kayaking, all of those are adventure and wilderness programs that may or may not meet the criteria as therapy. Again, therapy, I try and encourage folks to reserve that word for when there's a mental health professional present throughout the whole thing. So what it isn't is it's not petting horses and feeling better, right? A lot of folks think, well, it's just petting horses and feeling better. I don't see how that meets the criteria as therapy. Because you're right, it wouldn't meet the criteria as therapy. Petting horses and feeling better happens, right? But when the horse is gone, so's the positive impact. If that's all we did with horses is pet horses and feel better. There's a ton of research that says that petting your animals, petting horses, releases some chemical called oxytocin. hormone called oxytocin in both you and the animal, which is why it feels so good to pet your puppy or to pet a horse, usually, right? And so all those good things that stuff is released in your system when you pet horses or you pet animals often. And again, if that were all that we were doing, the moment the animal is gone, so is the positive benefit. We're up to something else, and we'll get into that. The nice thing about equine assisted psychotherapy as well is that talking is optional. It's not about talking. I've had entire sessions with clients and a mental health professional where there has not been a direct conversation about the bad thing or the traumas that have occurred that have brought me to the point where I can't sleep, I can't go out in a crowd, all those sorts of things. Talking doesn't have to happen, although it can happen, right? And we'll get to a little bit more about that. So, who is it for? Well, it can be appropriate for a huge variety of folks, right? We at Horse Sense have actually seen 3-year-olds. We've seen someone who is up to 95-year-old. We've had a World War II veteran that was here at the farm not a couple years ago who was 95 and was amazing. So it's not age specific. It is not gender specific, although demographically women are often drawn to this work because of the weird and undefinable thing that women have between women and horses, which that's a conversation for another time. But women often love it and men will engage with it. So we say that, this is for folks for whom tell me how that makes you feel might get you punched, right? And oftentimes that is more associated with some of our male clients than our female clients. Not true across the board, but oftentimes it does break down in terms of gender along those lines. So men will come to this, or male identified will come to this when they wouldn't go sit and talk to a therapist in an office. It is the primary treatment, the primary diagnoses that we at Heart and Horse Sense are working with tend to be around trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and resulting addictions to deal with this depression, anxiety, PTSD, and trauma, right? That's kind of the blanket umbrella. We're not particular specialists in, say, borderline diagnosis or dissociative identity disorder, DID. We've seen lots and lots of different diagnoses. The bulk of who we see in our day-to-day practice are folks who are responding to trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and depression, right? And stress, which all of this, toxic chronic stress. Contraindications means who shouldn't do this. The one characteristic that we know of folks who should not be here at the farm are folks who are actively using drugs. They are high, they are drunk, and going into the arena and interacting with horses is definitely contraindicated there. Frankly, we have not bumped up against many other contraindications that are true 100% across the board. Lots of things, if they're managed by pharmacology, there's no reason why they can't participate in equine assisted psychotherapy. There are some specialized contraindications, but in general, active drug use is the number one thing that we would say we can't have a session today. We need to reschedule. So what is it? It's just like normal therapy, right? Except the office is much bigger and who's in it is different, clearly. It is outpatient mental health. It's billable to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Medicare, Medicaid, Aetna, TRICARE. All of those things we can bill the work that we do to those insurance companies. And to do that, we don't say we're doing this really cool thing with horses, because almost every insurance company out there is going to say, oh, you're doing therapeutic riding, which you guys remember means there's not necessarily a therapist, a real licensed clinical therapist in the room. And the insurance company is going to say, well, we don't reimburse for that. We are not asking for reimbursement for equine assisted psychotherapy. We're asking for reimbursement for psychotherapy in which we happen to work with horses. There is other therapy and counseling out there in which the modality, how we do the work, is we use art, or we use music, or we use play therapy, or sand tray, any number of different, those are kind of some of the what happens, but the what is not what, it's not the how, right? We're trying to impact someone's mental health through interacting with horses. The horses are both, I like to say, the most important thing and the least important thing in the room. And it's both and. So welcome to the field of both and. So we use, and this will make sense, this language here will make sense to the therapists or those who are in the billing field, the health billing field. We use straight CPT codes. So our billing codes for insurance are no different than the billing codes for Amanda Watkins, who is a licensed mental health professional in private practice. And Amanda is the chair of the board for Heart of Horses. She may use things like play therapy and sand tray therapy and music and art therapy in her office. We happen to have a bigger office in which horses are present in that office. And the horses are the way in which we're going to treat the client. So clear as mud, but more will be revealed on this front. So theoretical underpinnings for those who are theory and interested in some of the underpinnings of the work that we're doing. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very, very much a part of the work that we're doing when we're in the arena with horses and clients. So we may be educating about very specific skills. And you may have seen, if you've been at the office, we have a deck of cards called the skill cards. That is, we specifically developed that to work through the most common issues and skills that were needed for the boys that we were working with when we worked with incarcerated and gang-involved youth. Across the board, almost all of them had need of learning some very basic skills, like knowing what my body is telling me, observing my environment, knowing when to chill, how to chill, right? Weighing pros and cons, some very, very fundamental skills that we taught through cognitive behavioral therapy with horses. So the next time you're in the small office up top in the arena, you can look for those skill cards and you can look through them and see that these are basic, we call it cognitive behavioral therapy with horses, is what it is. Motivational interviewing is another theoretical approach to doing therapy with people that our work is informed by. Gestalt is also another theoretical underpinning to the work. EGALA in particular is very big on talking about this being a brief and solution-focused intervention. And solution-focused means, in short, kind of as a simple explanation, it's not file cabinet therapy. Let's go back through everything that's happened to you so that we can kind of get to the underpinnings of what's going on now. Solution focus tends to be what's not working right here and now, and how do we move towards solution without necessarily dissecting everything all through the file cabinet. Right? So, and if you are clinical on this call, I am being very fast and loose and top level with a lot of these. But it suffices for our purpose today. Much of our work is informed by trauma-informed work, and in particular, NMT. So NMT stands for Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics. It's developed by Dr. Bruce Perry. You'll hear about Dr. Perry if you hang out with us long enough, or even for a short period of time, you'll hear about Dr. Perry, but it is specifically a neurosequential model to brain development that is the foundation of everything that we're doing here at Horse Sense and with Natural Lifemanship. And it really is as varied as any therapy. So when you go to an office therapist, they may have CBT informing their work, and motivational interviewing informing their work, and Gestalt, and all of these things may inform the work that they're doing, right? So really the therapy is as varied as the therapist's education, training, and competence. And equine assisted therapy, how? So as I mentioned, and this actually, I mentioned Edneyville Elementary School. This was one of our groups down at Edneyville Elementary. This photo is from there. So this is a therapist, and this is the horse professional. That's Richard, for those of you who know him, way back there, and that's our trailer and truck. And we brought Scout's Honor, and that is a horse named Masada, whom none of you have met, had the pleasure of meeting. Masada came over from Texas with my husband and I when we moved here in 2000. He's passed away. So we have a 2-person team, whether we are doing equine assisted therapy or whether we're doing equine assisted learning. That's the way we do it here. Other places will do it differently. Horses, the other member of the team, we have all breeds, all ages. People ask me what kind of horses are right for equine therapy, and I say as diverse as possible. We have big horses and short horses. We have heavy horses and thin horses. We have white horses and black horses and lots of brown horses and spotted horses. Diversity is, in my opinion, the most important thing that we have in our horse herd. That and them being kept as naturally as possible. For the human team, we do a lot of cross training. So a lot of our horse professionals do trainings in mental health, and a lot of our mental health professionals train in horsemanship and horse specialist skills. And we're open to all different types of horses. So I'm going to take a minute and have a sip and jump out of screen share mode for a second and invite any top level, anything popping up for you that you need to answer for as I take a breath. I saw those eyebrows raised, Jim. It's a lot of information. It's like, woof, it is. It's a lot. It's a lot. So welcome. Okay. All right. We'll go back to it. And remember, use the chat box as your parking lot for questions as we go along. It's going to get a little dense from here, and then we're going to come back out and be a little less dense. So here's your brain, right? Here is a graph that Dr. Perry, Bruce Perry at the Child Trauma Academy, developed to talk about how the brain develops neurosequentially. It develops sequentially from the bottom up, right? So the brain stem is where things like body temperature, heart rate, and blood pressure are automatically managed, assuming there's been no interruption or no trauma at an early age or at such repetition and such stress that it's disrupted some of these basic autonomic functions, right? So the brainstem develops first, and everything that develops on top of that, it's like scaffolding, or it's like a foundation. If the brainstem doesn't develop solidly, then everything that goes on top of it might be slightly askew, like scaffolding. Like if you had an unsecure foundation in scaffolding, you might end up topsy-turvy once you got kind of higher up, right? And Lida asks, is training available in typical university psychological programs, or is it strictly separate add-on certification? There are several universities that have undergraduate and master's level programs in equine assisted psychotherapy and learning. One of them is Prescott College that I've been teaching at for about 10 years. There are post-bac and post-doc certs, specialized trainings that are associated with universities, but most of them that are out there right now are largely EGALA, PATH, natural lifemanship, and other similar programs that have been developed. So, but there are good programs. I've taught undergrad programs at Warren Wilson here in the Asheville area before, and there are similar programs like that around the country, around the world. But there are only a few master's level programs. In fact, Prescott was the only master's level program for quite some time. And its future is uncertain in the midst of COVID. Education, in particular higher education at some of these smaller colleges, has been severely impacted. So the future of Prescott's equine assisted mental health and learning masters is in flux right now. So we'll keep you posted. So everything that gets put on top of a brainstem has the potential to be slightly askew or slightly off. So we're going to talk, and we talk all the time, in terms of the four main components of the brain: the brainstem, the diencephalon, which really is when I start to brainstem, that kind of regulation can be provided for me. I can receive brainstem regulation passively. If my mom picked me up and rocked me as a child and rocked me in a rhythmic, patterned, repetitive way, I received positive brainstem regulation. I received brainstem regulation. If I didn't get held and I didn't get rocked and I didn't have those things, or if when I was held, I was shaken or I was rocked arrhythmically, then I would not have developed the kinds of things that are necessary to have an integrated brain. Well, I feel like we're going to get too deep into the weeds, so I'm going to get off of this. I'm a geek about this stuff, so hang out with me. The third lecture is going to be all about this, and I'm going to go a little quickly through this because I feel like I might lose people if I get too geeky about this. So we talk in terms of regulate, relate, and reason. Regulation happens with rhythmic, patterned, repetitive sensory input. That rocking is rhythmic, patterned, and repetitive. I can trust how I'm going to be rocked. Rhythmic, pattern, repetitive input orally, like sound. Rhythmic, pattern, repetitive visual input. For example, when you walk into the barn, the rafters are spaced in a very specific distance from one another. So it's a very rhythmic visual input. Think columns and Corinthians and columns and things like that are very rhythmic visually and repetitive. And that is regulating to the lower regions of the brain. So regulation, we start with first and always, right? Then once regulation is happening, then we can start to think about relating, right? So I can then start to think about, oh, how are you, right? Now that I am regulated, I can turn my attention towards connection with you, or towards connection with a horse, towards connection with a dog, towards connection with other. How do I relate to someone? And then we get up into the upper regions of the brain. Once regulation and relation has happened, then we can start to get into reasoning, the upper regions of the brain. Now, again, I could geek out on a lot of this, but rhythmic, pattern, repetitive, anything can be regulating to all parts of the brain. And we're a whole brain response to trauma. So I'm going to kind of skip through these a little bit because they're a little thick. In short, though, the easy way for me to remember regulate, relate, reason is sensing, feeling, and thinking. Now, if you were to think about your life, do you spend as much time sensing your world as you do feeling your world? Or do you spend, like me, before I came into this field, I was a thinking, that was all I did. I was a brain. I was a head on a stick, and that's what I did, right? So what we work on here when we're at the farm is we work on trying to make these cups equally full, right? Or at least becoming aware of when something's empty, because that is going to dysregulate us. Short answer. And dysregulation, in short, is not so good, and regulation is good. Because when I'm regulated, I have the ability to respond appropriately to the moment, no matter what the moment calls for, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get a little deeper in. So I am going to stop the screen share real quick because I'm going to show you a video, and I need to set it up just right for a video. So this video has, well, I'll just play it for you. It has some sound that goes with it, and you're going to recognize some of these, but I just invite you to spend a minute watching this video, and then we'll come back as a group and talk. All right. So let me stop that. Stop that. Now, I invite you to think for 1 minute, what were you aware of in terms of sight, smell, touch, taste in that video? What did you notice about what was happening in that video in terms of sight, maybe sound? What senses were awakened as you watched that minute? And this is a jump in. What were you aware of? What did you notice? I noticed the sun, right? I noticed that it was a sunshiny, sun was shining, right? I noticed the green, right? I had visual sense of how green it was because that's not the way it is right now. Right? So I noticed those sensory things being awakened in me. And I'm wondering also, so we've got some sensory input going on, right? For those of you who know the rubber footing in the arena that those horses were in, there's the sense of if I picked that up and held that in my hand, what would that feel like? And that would be a sense of touch, right? So I have the ability to awaken all of my senses in spending a little bit of time with the horses there, right? So if we go up in the brain from there, what were you feeling as you were watching those horses? What's a feeling you were having when you were watching them?
I felt joy.
You felt joy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Anyone have a different feel?
Playfulness.
Playfulness. What was the other one?
Curious.
Curious. I see Lynn has written in beautiful scenery, joyful interaction, right? So those are all feelings, right, that I might have. And some of you were describing feelings that maybe the horses had for and with each other, right? So those are, how do I feel about other, whether it be horse or human? How do they feel about each other? We're talking about relationships, right? We're talking about how do we connect or how don't we connect with each other? And that's the relation. So regulate, relate, reason. Did any of you have any thoughts that came into mind as you were watching the horses?
I was
I'd
kind
say
of
I-
wondering with the third horse.
Yeah, wondering what's going on with the third horse, right? The spotted horse that was off, So gosh, I wonder what's happening with him. There was someone else. Was that Brian or Jim? I heard a.
Yeah, I have to say, I definitely was taking an analytical approach, trying to figure out what the behavior was as to whether or not there was an aggression growing there or somebody was irritated in that group,
Right.
needing attention.
Right. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having that analytical approach. What we often bump up against when we're doing this work is that we have too much. One cup is too full and the other cups don't have anything in them. And we want to have a little more balance, right? And it's many of us who do really well in traditional educational environments tend to be really, really, really reason heavy, right? And our culture, our Western culture, tends to be very, very reason heavy. It doesn't make it wrong, but it does create imbalance, right? And what we want to do is we want to get back to a little more balance, right? So no harm, no foul. You're in good company. Like I said, I was a head on a stick for most of my college and grad school career. My body did nothing but take me to the library, right? Back when we had to go to libraries and they didn't have this thing called the internet. A couple of you remember that along with me. So that is a little bit of what we're doing when we're doing this work, right? We're looking at where are some of the deficits, where do we need to spend more time so that we can have an integrated brain. And I'm going to kind of go through a couple more images, and I want you to think through what you sense in the image, what you feel, and what you think. And one of these, I guarantee you, is going to be more comfortable and easy for you. One of these three things is going to be more comfortable and easier for you than the others, right? So what do your senses tell you? And that we won't answer this one. This will be rhetorical. What do your senses tell you about this moment? What are your feelings? What's your feeling about this moment? Either how you feel about it or how you think the horse feels about it, or how the person whose foot is there feels about it. And then what are your thoughts about this moment? What are your senses tell you about this image? What are your feelings about this image? What are your thoughts about this image? Again, what are your senses tell you about this moment? What do you feel about what's in this picture about this moment? And what do you think about it? My puppy's shaking in the background. Pardon the interruption. What do you sense about this moment? What do you feel about this image? And what do you think about this image? Right? So what happens with the horses is that we have all of our brain has the ability to be lit up, as it were. We have the ability to get to all of these things, all of these parts of the brain rather easily when that isn't necessarily so in a traditional office environment. It does not mean that a traditional office environment cannot do all of these things. It just means that we're kind of lazy and we get to do it a lot more easily because we've got these great big horses and we've got this natural environment and we've got the sound of the leaves under the horse's feet. We've got the dappling of the sun through the trees on the trees and the ground around us. We've got all of this rich sensory input. We've got this opportunity to connect and relate and to reflect back our patterns of connecting and relating in real time with a therapist there and a horse professional there to help kind of sort out what's working and what's not, right? So it's this really wonderful opportunity. And I believe obviously I believe in it wholeheartedly. I think that it is the difference maker for some people. I have known people and seen people who have had years and years and years and years and years of therapy who have not been able to get to the point that they've been able to get after 10 sessions out at the farm, right? So it can get into places where traditional types of therapies don't, and it can do so somewhat quickly with a lot less defensiveness, as it were. So I'll talk through a little bit more of our presentations. We're almost, well, we're not almost there, but I'll move quickly through some of these. And like I said, Jim will make these available. Equine assisted learning is, again, as I mentioned when we talked about the tree, it may or may not have a mental health professional present. School groups, youth groups, corporate groups. Its impact on clients, some of what we've been able to measure and see in our clients is that it increases awareness of my connection with myself and my connection with others. And interacting with the horse allows us an opportunity to talk about how we either do or don't do that well, or we do or don't do that in ways that serve us and meet our needs. So we increase our ability to track, to notice what's going on in myself and what's going on in others, i.e. observing my environment. And there's an opportunity in that tracking to separate from what's happening to my reaction. So if you guys, as all of you have been, you've come to a tour or a demonstration and you've seen me talk about this moment of observing the horses versus interpreting what they're doing, right? And there's an opportunity to tease those things apart, right? We often go too quickly from observation to interpretation. And it's that interpretation that might be landing us in the same predicament over and over and over again. And if we slow down and back up and focus on observation a little more, we might start noticing more, or we might start noticing things differently, which then impacts our ability to move forward differently. A lot of what happens with horses is what we call co-regulation. So regulation, when you're a baby, and if your mom picked you up and rocked you, you were co-regulating with your mom or with whoever it was that picked you up and rocked you. Co-regulation is when I get anxious or nervous, I might reach over and hold my husband's hand. I am looking for and seeking co-regulation with him when I start to lose my ability to self-regulate. So a lot of what we do with horses when we're doing this work is we're offering an opportunity for clients to co-regulate with us as the human treatment team, with the horses as the horse part of the treatment team. And I can seek regulation in relationship with someone that I might find hard to do on my own. Okay. Similarly, it's just, there's nothing similar about this. It's one of my favorite pictures, and I just had to throw it in here. Incredible. What happens in the arena slows at the farm in equine therapy. It slows things down enough to notice what's happening. Now, many people have heard that meditation is supposed to be good for them, but meditation is not easy by any stretch, right? A lot of folks can learn how to pay attention to their thoughts, to their feelings, and to their environment a little more easily initially through interacting with horses at the farm. So as the notes down here say, we Westerners oftentimes favor bustle energy to inertia, which is akin to sitting meditation, for example. And this movement, it can be meditation in motion. And we talk about zone, we talk about flow, all of those things are possible. We do, I would say 75% of everything, 75 to 80% of every single session that happens at the farm is unmounted. You do not have to get on the back of a horse in order for horses to be a part of your therapy and your counseling. Although there are times and there are folks for whom we believe that mounted work is the starting point and the most efficient starting point. And many of you have been part of those sessions, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But you can do tons of stuff with horses unmounted. Breathing, walking, grooming, asking for connection, working on boundaries, working on intimacy. Then when we get to mounted work, we are talking about building connection to the one that carries me, right? And what do I mean by connection to the one that carries me? The person who is, oops, and I see someone is trying to get in here. Let me let them in because I see someone, there we go. And then I'll go back. Go ahead and admit, all right. So connection to the one that carries me. So in an ideal world, the connection to the one who carried me is full of puppies and balloons and joy and love, right? And we all know that as parents, we're not perfect, right? And we rarely did everything just right, even when we intended to, right? So sometimes that connection was not established well, or it was broken because of trauma or abuse or neglect or whatever. So, and that can happen and impact the brain at any time in a person's development, right? So we like to talk about mounted work as connection to the one that carries me, like our mother carried us for 9 months, right? It is the quickest way for me to offer rhythmic, patterned, repetitive, passive regulation. Passive regulation means I don't have to do anything to get this regulation in order to get this regulation, right? Being on the back of a horse, for those of you, many of you know, the walking, right? It can be incredibly rhythmic, pattern, and repetitive. So we're getting passive regulation on board the human and helping their brain settle, right? Helping the lower regions of the brain regulate enough so that we can then start to move up the brain and integrate more of the brain. and start to engage the whole brain, as it were. Why horses? Well, we're going to do an entire session next time, about why horses and horsemanship and those kinds of things. Oops, I see somebody else has gotten kicked out maybe and coming back. So letting them back in. We're going to do a whole session, but the short version is they're clean, unbiased feedback. They don't care how much your tennis shoes cost, what you do for a living. They just want to know who you are. They're curious. They're engaged. They are herd animals, and they are the original trauma brain, right? Horses are prey, and almost everything else in the world that they tend to hang out in. All of us humans, dogs, there's so many predators, right? Humans can be both predator and prey, but horses are definitely prey. So just some lovely pictures where movement. So once we get passive regulation on board, when we have that rhythmic pattern, repetitive regulation that's being provided for me. So if we were sitting in a swing and you were not pushing the swing, but I was, then I would be providing that passive regulation for you. When you started to push the swing with your feet, then you would be engaging the diencephalon. You would be using movement of your own that you initiate to create rhythmic pattern repetitive, right? Gum chewing is a great example of people who are attempting to regulate themselves, right? And doing it through the rhythmic patterned gum chewing, right? Going for a walk is often regulating the diencephalon, that second region of the brain. This is a group of Vietnam vets that come out every so often and spend an afternoon with the horses. And you can see that, you know, it's again back in that outdoor arena. You can see the visual and the sensory input of what's going on here. A lot of our clients, especially some of our male clients and our veterans, are worried that we're all about trying to get them to be soft and cuddly, and it's all about puppies and balloons and kumbaya. That we're going to make them weak and slow by connecting them up with these parts of themselves. And what we very strongly come back with is, if it is appropriate for you to run or to fight, I want you to be able to run or fight. We're not trying to take that away from anybody, because running and fighting is necessary in today's world. It's going to be necessary at some point, right? We don't want to take those away from you. What we want to be able to do, though, is give you the ability to choose your response. And that is often what trauma takes away. And I'll go back to this quote. Trauma changes the self-awareness system. Traumatized people often become insensible to themselves. They do not know the senses around them and insensible to themselves. They find it difficult to sense pleasure and to feel engaged. These understandings force us to use methods to awaken the sensory modalities in the person. And that's by a gentleman named Bessel van der Kolk in a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Another super, super book about the kind of work that we're doing here on the farm, right? So we don't want to take away your ability to fight if fight is the right answer. But oftentimes trauma will reset the alarm system so that everything is an alarm. Right? Even something as simple as a door slamming or a car backfiring is cause for full-on flight. Some wonderful photos of some horses and vets and others, horses that you may or may not have met. This is hearkening back to the early days of horse sense, when we worked with the boys from the Swannanoa Youth Development Center. They would come out in shackles and leg irons and get uncuffed and go work with the horses, and then get cuffed and go back to the lockdown facility. It is appropriate for them to be able to fight should they need to be able to defend themselves should they need to. We didn't want to take that away from them, but we also wanted them to be able to access other parts of themselves where fight may have become the predominant response to the world around them. We wanted them to also be able to recognize when it was safe to take the armor off, who it was safe to take the armor off around, and when and how to put it back on, right? So additional readings, again, we'll make this available, but the short version is EGALA has a book called Transforming Therapy Through Horses. Natural Lifemanship has lots of different training videos and books, not books, but manuals. It has not been put into a book yet, but that's in process, of course. In the meantime, if you're interested in how natural lifemanship does the work that it does, I would recommend the book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Bruce Perry. And it will give you an overview of the neurosequential model of brain development and neurosequential model of therapy. Path International, one of its biggest proponents that has written books is Leif Hallberg. She has a book called Clinical Practice of Equine Assisted Psychotherapy. She also has a book called Walking the Way of the Horse, which is quite outdated at this point, but still an enormous undertaking. But she is primarily path identified, and a lot of her language and a lot of her writing reflects her identification with path. And of course, I have a book called More Than a Mirror: Horses, Humans, and Therapeutic Practice, which is specific to the work that we're doing here. Our work is informed largely by EGALA and by natural lifemanship. I have been trained in equine assist. I've been trained by PATH back when it was called NARA and EFMA. I've been trained by lots of other folks. The ones that we most draw from on a day-to-day basis with our clients is the EGALA and the natural lifemanship models. So that, my friends, is a basic introduction to equine-assisted psychotherapy and learning. And I'm going to take a sip of water, and it's a free-for-all. Questions are more than welcome. We got almost 20 minutes. We got 15 minutes, so question away. And thank you for bearing with me. I know it's a lot of information. I get very excited about what I do, and I get carried away. So if you've got a question, bring it on.
So how do we get started?
How do we get started to do what?
To assist you with your equine therapy.
You're doing it right now. So there's a series of educational classes that need to be taken. And then there will also be, yes, Deb, you can buy our book at the farm. There will also be hands-on trainings at the farm, probably when it warms up a little bit. But we need folks to understand first and foremost that we're not therapeutic riding, that we're not petting horses and feeling better, and that it's not about making people feel good through hanging out with horses.
I'm a nurse, so I sort of, and I have always been very interested in mental health. So this is, and I love horses. So this is like the merit of a lot of things for me right here. And I'm
nice.
I'm very excited.
Yes, and it is a huge light bulb moment that so many of us, I know, myself included, needed, but it didn't exist in this form when I needed it. So because that's the way I'm built, I made it available to others. So it's so exciting. So you're on the path, Cynthia, and stay the course. We want you guys to be super trained, to be able to assist us in ways that do no harm and support the client. And it takes a little bit of time. It looks like it's petting horses and feeling better, but there's more that goes into it.
I'm sure there's techniques that.
Yes, indeed. Will this presentation be shareable to others? We want folks to connect with us to get access to the presentation. It's our preference because we want to have the training around it, and we want them to be able to be a volunteer here. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this, is to train up wonderful volunteers like Cynthia and Lyda and all these people that we've been working with that have been hanging out at the farm. So we will make it available to others, but as part of our grants, we have promised them that we would educate our broad community. So we have to do pre-tests, we have to do post-tests. So the fun answer is you are going to get those 5 questions sent to you again. And hopefully we've hit all of the questions. And many of you had some good answers before then, and now you'll have some others. Yeah, the biggest challenge we have had is that EAP is largely associated with the Employee Assistance Program. And it's been quite a struggle to get EAP out of Employee Assistance Program and understood as equine assisted psychotherapy. Another question, what capacity will we be able to volunteer? So the number one way that folks will be able to volunteer will be first and foremost in helping us keep the horses and the farm functioning well, right? Making sure that it looks good, that everything's safe, that the horses are loved, right? So the stuff that you do when you come out on Saturday volunteering pays benefits that you will never see, but it pays benefits. As you get more into working with clients, we're going to be leaning on our volunteers in two ways, right? One, we may ask you to consider helping in transportation. Transportation is one of the single biggest challenges that we have, and we're not that far from Asheville. But when folks don't have reliable transportation, and when there's no public transportation to the farm, we may ask for your help in getting clients to the farm, right? And when you bring those clients to the farm, we want you in that drive up and in that drive back to first do no harm, and second, do good, right? And there are going to be ways that we're going to invite you to do that, and ways that we're going to say it won't be helpful. And we'll get through those trainings as well for those who can help us with transportation, because it's a huge deal. I mean, if we had a van that we could go to the VA and set a meeting time for anyone who can, because a lot of vets can get to the VA, but they can't get to the farm, right? And the VA can't always pull their van and bring all their vets to our farm, or the Veterans Restoration Quarters. There are a number of different organizations that want their clients to come to our farm, but either they can't get their clients to our farm with their transportation, or the clients themselves can't get to our farm because it's not on the bus lines, right? So transportation is a big deal. Another way is hands-on with us, with horses and clients. And this is the way that everybody really wants to interact and support. And it's also the one that we want you to have gone through the most training to do alongside us. So, and we'll get there, but they look like when we have some of our youth groups come out from Children First or from Asheville City Parks and Rec, we need help managing all those bodies. We might have 6 kids that are very dysregulated, right? They're not bad. They're not acting out. They're dysregulated, right? And that's kind of a language shift that a lot of folks need to kind of get their arms around. They're not bad. They're not, they're dysregulated. And we need to figure out how to regulate. And once we can help regulate them, then we can relate, and they can relate to us. Then we can get into the reasoning system, right? So regulate, regulate, regulate. So our kiddos might come out, they might be running all over the place, losing their little minds because for whatever reason, right? It might look like they're bad and they're not, right? So how do we help them? Well, one of the first things that we'll do with many of those kiddos that are coming to us from what I call less than nurturing backgrounds is that we're going to want them to ride horses. We're going to want to get them on the back of a horse sooner rather than later to get some of that passive, rhythmic pattern, repetitive regulation into their systems. And for those of you who've been sidewalkers, been with us out at the farm sidewalking and part of this, you know the difference between these kiddos coming out of the van and getting back into the van, right? The difference can be striking. So assisting us in the arena, oftentimes we'll have what are called sidewalkers that are on either side. So let's say kiddo is on the back of the horse. Myself or Richard or another horse professional at Horse Sense is leading the horse. And volunteers will be on either side of the horse at the client, by the side of the client, helping them follow the direction of the therapist who's running the session and helping them stay safe, right? It's to some degree, you might even be a glorified mattress, right? If a kid's coming off, we want them to come off on you. And that's not always pleasant, but it is part of the job, right? One of the things that happens when the lower regions of the brain are dysregulated is that I lose my sense of balance. I might think that I am perfectly centered even though everyone around me knows that I'm not. And that goes to lower region of the brain dysregulation, right? And you will see that in our clients before they know that it's true of them, right? And so you are there as safety. You're there to help, and you're there to relate, right? You're there to be part of their relationship sphere, right? And a lot of times they won't even see you for a while. They won't even know you're there. When we're working with our veterans and working with some of our other clients, we similarly will do group work where clients are mounted, and we'll need support for that kind of session. We'll also, we do something called immersions, and those immersions tend to be on site at the brick house, and they are for anywhere from 5 to 6 clients at a time will come. They'll spend the night, they'll spend Thursday through Sunday at the brick house, and we'll do horses and equine therapy and horsemanship and equine assisted learning from sunup to sundown, right? We will need help doing a variety of things when we're doing immersions again. We haven't done immersions, obviously, all of 2020 because of COVID. We don't know when we're going to do them again, but we are working with more and more facilities that are shelters themselves. So these folks have already been living in close proximity to each other, so they're already an intact group. So we may have more immersions that aren't general public immersions. Like we've had veterans come from Greenland and Alaska and New England and Texas and Florida for our immersion retreats, and they've not known each other until they got to the farm. So we probably won't be doing those anytime super soon, but we might have a residential shelter for domestic violence or intimate partner violence survivors come to the farm and do an immersion. And those immersions are very hands-on affairs. There's a lot that needs doing. We need food help, we need snacks, we need help with cleanup and taking care of things. There's a lot that goes on, and it's 24/7. So we don't have any of those in place right now, obviously, but we're working towards it. So those are some of the ways and the main ways that folks will be volunteering.
When is the next Saturday volunteer day?
The next one, Jackie, I know is on this call. I think it's February 16th. I think it's February 16th. And Jackie, if you can check your calendar and jump in and tell me if I'm right or wrong. And I'll be leading horsemanship that afternoon. So I think it's going to be, we set it up for 12 to 1:30, and then horse for the service portion, and then 1:30 to 3 for the learning portion. And I'm going to be leading it. And if we have 16 people like we did last Saturday, then I'll pull in Richard to help me with it. So come one, come all, and we'll have some fun learning how we support the horses to do this work. So Lynn asks, can this therapy work for people who are afraid of horses? Absolutely. And then if I had $1 for everyone who was afraid of horses that came and did therapy here, this is an opportunity to really in real time work with fear not keeping you stuck from the things that you want to do in your life, right? If I had $1 for every person I met who was both drawn to horses and afraid of them, right, I wouldn't have to fundraise. So there's something about connecting with horses that draws us in and appropriately causes us to be fearful. And what I say is that if you're not a little bit concerned about your safety when you're hanging out with horses, then I'm worried about you, because it is appropriate to be alert, not in alarm, not in terror, not completely shut down. It is appropriate to be in an alert state when you're hanging out with horses. So you do not have to, you don't have to be unafraid. And being afraid, this is a great chance, because I guarantee you're going to come up. If you're like most people, you're going to be afraid of something that you actually still want to do. How do you do it? How do you get over that fear? And I'm not a just feel the fear and do it anyway. I think that there's more to it than that. I think that just throwing yourself off the deep end and just do it is a bad plan, or not a very helpful plan, not every time, right? So this will give you a chance to dance with that fear in real time with a mental health professional right by your side to help you walk through that fear and get on the other side so that you can regulate enough to do this for yourself outside of the arena. So I hate my job. You can tell I'm just so bored and uninterested in all of these questions. I do physical therapy, whole health coaching with the VA. I would like to work on a program with you guys that would include transport. Wonderful. That's awesome. We normally in normal non-COVID times, we probably have one VA group a week on the farm, 45 weeks out of the year. So it is very abnormal, and we're going through withdrawals because we miss our veterans groups like you can't imagine. Yes, that's delightful. And Kelly says the volunteer day is on the 20th. So thank you, Kelly. And we will confirm that in an email that will come out. Maybe Jackie can follow up when she sends that email out. She can add both the next volunteering day and the 5-question thing that you have to do for us to meet our criteria for the grant money that we've recently theoretically received. Hopefully we'll receive at some point in the very near future. Don't ever get in, federal grants are wonderful, and it also helps when they actually pay. So we are now 4 months out of providing services without being paid, and success is imminent. I'm an optimist through and through, but I'm also a realist. So we're doing everything we need to do to keep on keeping on, but I don't know how some other nonprofits do it, because we're really lucky that we have the support of folks like y'all and donors and grantors and an amazing board. We've got several board members on today's call. Lyda and Aaron are board members, and we're so grateful for the work that they do. And we're so grateful for you guys to be here. So I want to honor the fact that it is 1:30 and I promised you an hour and a half. So if you want to head out, no harm, no foul. It's not exactly a beautiful day out there. At least it's not here at the farm. It's still a little overcast. So Jackie has confirmed the next volunteering day will be noon on February 20th. And then again, we're not sure the time on the in March. So stay tuned for the time. Stay tuned for the follow-up quiz and the next lecture. The next lecture is going to be all about the horses and horsemanship. How do we integrate the horses into the work that we do, right? And it's both all about the horse, and it's not about the horse at all. So and we'll get to all of that. But so look forward to seeing you if you're able to join in-person volunteering. Like I said, I'll be leading the horse time, and we'll have a good time together. And I'll shut up and invite questions. But I thank you for coming today, and thank you for your commitment and dedication and service desire to be here and to be part of the difference that we're going to make and continue to make for many, many, many people that are hurting right now. And that includes all of us too. It's in service that we get, right? So good on you for being here. You're serving yourself by serving others, in my opinion. And thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if anybody's got a question, I'll hang on for a minute or two, and I'm going to stop the recording.